Welcome, everyone. I'm Greg Stanley. I'm here with Wes Warren for Whitehall Management. Our topic today is a big one, very important. So many see that once they hire an associate, soon after, the profitability picture of the practice is nowhere near as good as it once was. And this almost seems like it's happening with more production. Wes, can you comment on this?
Yeah, it's a common problem. I would say that most people that had a bad experience with an associate, this is exactly what happened. You're doing 100,000 a month, you're ready to add an associate, you add one, the practice goes up to 140, 150, but all the profit, sometimes all the profit disappears. Where you're, like you said, you're producing more, but the net, your personal take home actually can go to the point where it's almost negative or close, or some cases negative. There's various reasons why that happens. Probably the number one reason that we see when we first go in, Greg, is that there's really not enough patients to go around. And maybe the practice pulled the trigger on an associate too soon. And patients that you would see, now the associate's seeing. That's probably the number one cause of this problem, where you've got an associate sitting around with nothing to do and you kind of feel obligated to get them busy. And so you decide to let them see a bunch of the patients, a lot of the new patients. I've seen offices where they have the associate see all the new patients. I obviously hygiene checks, and then all of a sudden the profit disappears. So couple problems. One would be, do we really have enough patients to spread around to an associate? We could talk about that in a minute. The other thing is, because the associate doesn't have anything to do, there's a pressure from the team to get patients seen and out on time, right? They will naturally have the associate see way more patients than the associate should. So that's the big problem. But if we back up a little bit, Greg, the net on associate production is never going to be the same as your own. That's so on a practice doing 100,000 a month, Greg, with no associate, how much are they supposed to net? What's the range?
Practice grossing 100,000 without an associate or with an associate?
Without an associate.
Oh, probably 35%.
So they're taking home 35,000 a month, right? And we add an associate, and if the associate produces 50,000, how much should we expect to net off of the associate's production?
Yeah, that's very good to think of them separately. Associate production, usually you do well to keep 15 to 25%, 15 to 20% of their separate production. Can I back up just a second with this?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of us got into associates just like when we got married to our spouse. The theory was, hey, I already got a house payment, I already got this, I got that. How much more can it cost? Yet we find that with the associate doctor, we're adding assistants. Eventually, there's a hygienist they have to check in order to get the business they need, which means some marketing to get new. In other words, you start adding it up. And when you take on associate, it's far more than just the cost of what the associate takes out. There's the whole support system for the associate. That's where the overhead goes up. And then we, like you were saying, we tend to see them produce less per capita than we're producing off the patients they see. Makes for a pretty rough way to go forward. So yeah, 15 to 20%, Wes, is what we can hope for. Even though if you get a sharp associate, great staff, a good way to get good patients, you might even see that go up at 22, maybe 24%, which are all worthy goals. Can I tell you another mistake people make that just destroys their net profit when adding associate? They tend to respond to what they think is the market talking to them, how much they have to pay them. Oh, you've got to pay an associate this amount. And the associate sitting in front of you will certainly confirm that. Yeah, you have to pay me 35 or 40%. Yet, not really. What the associate wants is a good paycheck, a good opportunity, a good place to work. And you have to feel confident enough to offer this to an associate doctor at a realistic percentage. A lot of doctors get around this by, yeah, associate says, oh, I want 35%, which is kind of unsupportable, certainly with a practice full of associates. So they'll say something like, yeah, after you produce 80,000 or 50,000 or something, we'll go to 35%. I have seen that work. Um, so remember, we can't let the marketplace dictate what we're going to pay and then think we're going to get a profit. Also, once you take on associates, you are competing with the DSO model. The people out there, opening 100 practices, paying for things at prices that you might find unsustainable. Because remember, they're not just spending their earnings from practice, they're betting on turning this into really a higher stock multiple, and they're spending that as well. So there's a lot of mistakes you can make when you start down this path. The last thing you'd want to do is take fragments of information from various sources and try to chart your associate path forward.
I think that's a good point, especially when you talked about two can live as cheaply as one, that is something that I hear quite a bit is, hey, I'm already paying for the building. I'm already kind of paying for the marketing. I'm already paying for this team here. So, adding an associate, why shouldn't there be decent profit there? And it really doesn't play out
There is
logically, and there's a reason for that.
there's one argument, and that is I now just want to work 2 days a week and I'll have an associate on the days I'm not there. That's almost a two can live as cheaply as one, almost, but you're not
but
making as much as you were.
but it doesn't work. So here's the reason why. Is it requires so many team members to, let's say the practice sees 500 people a month. So it's a busy practice, right? 500 people a month. Well, that requires a certain amount of team to support that. And you can, off of that, can produce X. The problem is they're not going to produce what you produce. They're going to produce remarkably less, but the support system is the same. And therein lies the problem. That's why it's not as profitable. They cannot, generally speaking, now there are associates out there that can do it, but I would say 90%, 95%, somewhere in that range, are not going to hit numbers that our owner doctors can hit. And it's just not realistic. So it's their production per patient seen, if you will. Well, unmanaged, it'll be 50% of the owner. It'll be 50%, meaning there's no profit. There's actually negative profit. A number that we'll see quite often is $500 per patient seen for a month. A good owner doctor can push that to 600 or 700 even. But an associate left to themselves, it's 300. And of course, like I said, it's the same volume of patients running through there. That means it requires the same size team. And that's why profitability disappears with an associate. Kind of a word of wisdom would be make sure that you have quotas set up before you bring on an associate of how many new patients they're allowed to see, how many hygiene checks they're allowed to see in a given month, and make sure that that doesn't get violated until they can prove that they can produce and hit decent numbers off of that patient flow, or else you get what we just talked about, where it goes negative. Okay. Next is kind of, so that's like, oh, it was a disaster. I lost money and all that kind of stuff. But most people struggle to make just a profit off of the associate portion, meaning they're doing fine. The practice is still netting. I add an associate, but I'm not really making more. I'm still making about the same. So I'm really not netting what I should off the associate. Couple things there. So one would be the inefficiency of case acceptance by the associate is the number one culprit.
Right.
Uh, it could be patient flow, meaning you don't have enough patient flow to keep them busy. But I would say number one is case acceptance. That's usually the thing that they struggle with. And they typically struggle in one of three areas here. One is how they communicate with patients. They communicate in a way that doesn't come with an air of confidence. Their communication is filled with a lot of ums and uhs and ifs and maybes, might, could. It gets unclear. It's not delivered with real confidence. And that impacts their case acceptance. Number two, creating urgency, meaning the associates will struggle with laying out the reasons why this patient should not wait very long to get this tooth done. So urgency is, why should I do this now? Yes, I believe you, but you've got to convince me that we should do it right away. And they'll struggle there. And then lastly, another big one is they'll either fall one side of this or the other. Either they're too conservative, they just are conservative with their dentistry, don't want to offend people, don't want to give people bad news, and so they just don't present any dentistry. But more often than not, they're asking the patient to do way too much on their first encounter, especially with a new associate in an office. They're pushing case development as if they were, 20, 30-year veteran with all this confidence and validity that they just don't have. And so they massively overshoot how much dentistry is presented to any given patient. Those are the three areas that usually we have to work on to get their case development up. And that can be supported with assistance doing pre-assessment. And obviously, if you got a great treatment coordinator, they sometimes can help an associate on the back end. And meaning, patient came through, we presented a lot of dentistry. Good treatment coordinator can know how to go, okay, let's just start here with the patient. So those three things are the areas to look at. So the pre-assessment, what the doctor's saying, and then your treatment coordinator. Other side of it, Greg, is the sheer patient flow. How much patient flow does an associate need to be productive? Usually you need to have them seeing at least one column of patients a day in terms of hygiene checks. So they got to have roughly 8 hygiene checks a day. And really just like one new patient a day on average is enough for them to cross the threshold of 50,000 a month in restorative production and push into the 60,000. Now, once they're hitting that number, you can open up the floodgates, let them see more, you can do more marketing. But I certainly wouldn't do it before they prove to you though that they can hit those numbers that I'm talking about.
We can work with associates. We can teach them. We can pressure them. We can bonus them. We can put them with staff that encourage them. We can do all these things, and we can see their production per patient go up and still be sabotaged and not even know where it came from. Let me explain. When associates get the idea, okay, I've got to produce more to be here, which is, I'm sure, very common in the DSO setting, what we forget is that even as an owner, when you got really good at selling a lot of dentistry, you had to keep in mind how good you were at keeping the patient and inspiring them so they would refer. So we get an associate all hyped up to sell more dentistry, and pretty soon they are, but they're running patients off with completed dentistry. They're running patients off, and now we have the added cost of more marketing, which brings in a little bit lower grade of patient for most people, maybe lower than what the associate's threshold can even stand. And so if they don't drink all the Kool-Aid, if they don't sell the dentistry, and they can't charm the patient into really wanting it, and there's an art to that. If they can't do that, we're going to add the cost of marketing and the cost of the practice, of having a lot of reluctant people coming through the door through marketing. So it gets rather complicated, and that's why we always, when Wes and I run into people, we say, get on the phone with us, let's talk through it. And you'll find that sometimes the secrets to what's holding you back is hidden in places you would never look. Wes, I know you took lessons in sailing. Is there,
Mhm.
I've heard such a thing as a sea anchor. What's a sea anchor? You should
It's
know
like
what
a
that is.
parachute in the water that kind
Right.
of, right, slows you down.
A lot of you have one and you don't know what it is or where it is. And you're just putting up more and more canvas and you're not going any faster. You're spending more money, you're working harder, but until you can find out that, hey, the associate's not getting referrals, the cases aren't being developed, the same day is not being done, until you can find out where the weakness is, you're going to struggle.
I would point out one other thing on that list that you just gave is no shows. So you get patients that uh, see the associate in hygiene. 6 months later, obviously it's an indicator. It takes a while to spot it, but all of a sudden you're having all these patients in hygiene and they're having trouble keeping it filled. And 6 months ago or a year ago, you had an associate. That's definitely an indicator of this problem. And then, of course, referrals. You got to track your patient-to-patient referrals, and that's also a very quick, much quicker indicator. Let's put it that way. Certainly 90 days, the indication if referrals drop, usually look back what was going on 90 days ago, and if you added the associate, then uh, that's definitely an indication.
So we're making this sound really bad uh, for, for profitability with an associate. We work with people every day that are probably have associates that are more profitable than a lot of owners. They've got it fine tuned to where the staff are super motivated to tee the cases up, kind of like teeing the volleyball up at the net. All the associate has to do is spike the ball. They get everything ready. They keep it moving. They do a lot of same day. They know how to find that same day, by the way, is low hanging fruit. Those are people that are glad to do dentistry. If I can do it while I'm still here, I don't have to come back. So people that have tuned up their operation, associates are profitable. And it's not all just about money. If you get time off, where the practice is still functioning well, netting well, life is better. So it can be a real good thing.
Absolutely. I think that's why a lot of people try this path because they can see how great it would be if I could get it to work. But getting it to work is buried in those things that we talked about, Greg. It's getting the team involved, it's the case acceptance, it's making sure you get the right patient flow into the practice to support them. Uh, and once you get it all working, it's great. It's
It can be a
it's
great thing. Yes.
yeah, best of all worlds, really. So.
I would suggest that if you're feeling like some of your profitability uh, left the day your associate came, I suggest you get on the phone with Wes and I, and let's find out where it went and put it back in the picture.
All right. Yep.
Thanks a lot.
Definitely. Yeah, you can schedule with us on our link at whitehallmgt.com. And there's a link to schedule. It's pretty darn easy. You don't have to talk to anybody. So, all right. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.